Chapter 5, Keeping Your Higher Self Connection. What you will learn in this chapter. Next steps in talking and listening to your higher self. How to practice your higher self connection to support living a fearless life. Once you reach a certain level of mastery, the only question to ever ask your higher self. Commitment time. If you already have a great higher self connection, a 6-week review and practice will still improve your connection from where it is today. Many successful actors and dancers continue to take classes long after achieving prominence. How will you know if you really need to practice? If you do not follow your inner guidance / higher self 100% of the time, you do not really trust it. You decide here and now that you will keep a practice period like a trial period. Your trial period is a segment of time that you choose for yourself. It can be any length of time. It should be at least 45 days. It could be longer. Make sure you make this decision at the ego level. This is to ensure that the decision is being made in a way that you are completely happy with your choice. I will refer to the practice period as being 6 weeks for the sake of discussion. Your practice period is 45 days or more. The exact length of time is for you to decide. Once you have established or received your signals or symbols from the higher self, it is time to make a commitment to continue to work with your higher self for a period of time. You are learning the language of the higher self and you need to get really good at it. If you were learning a foreign language, the first thing you might learn is yes and no, but you do not stop there. I am asking you to make a commitment of time to work with your higher self and practice. I want you to perfect your practice. Your higher self connection will be with you for the rest of your life. In the overall scheme of things, 6 weeks is a small investment. Choosing your practice because it pleases you and you are willing to commit to the time. After you select a time frame, please assign a future date to it. That means that if today is the 15th of the month and your practice period is for 6 weeks, you will name the first of the month 2 months hence. Specifically, if today is July 15, your practice period will end on September 1st. If you breezed by the methods for connecting to the higher self in this previous chapter, this would be a good time to go back and review them before continuing. What kinds of questions will you ask during your practice period? This is one of the most critical sections on how to work with your higher self. You will choose questions that have no value to you and are of no consequence to you. These questions will be about things that you really do not care which way you do it. The reason you ask about insignificant things is because you do not want your ego to participate. Your ego has done a terrific job of getting you where you are today, and it will not be able to resist participating on issues that matter to you. So give yourself a break from the ego and select questions that do not concern the ego. For example, you might ask, higher self, is it in my highest and best good to wear the red shirt or the blue shirt? If you are meeting your best friend who always compliments how you look when wearing red, you probably would want to wear the red shirt, so it is not a good practice question. Ask questions about actions you are willing to complete. Make sure your practice period is loaded with questions you are willing to ask and follow through with no matter what your higher self tells you. If you are unwilling to follow through with your higher self's answer, don't ask it. If you love chocolate chip cookies, don't ask your higher self about having one because the temptation to eat one will be too great. You might decide to eat one and then later tell yourself, well, the no really was not a clear signal and I really could not tell. You do not want to sabotage yourself, so do not ask higher self questions if you already prefer a certain outcome. If you ask your higher self a question and then decide not to follow through on the answer, you will be sabotaging your practice. During the practice period, please remember that if you ask your higher self, you must follow through. If you do not, you will interfere with your communication and defeat the purpose of your practice period, which is to develop this spectacular connection. Why is my ego eliminated in this equation? Your ego does not need you asking your higher self for things it is accustomed to handling for you and will not easily relinquish the job of running your life. You are very likely getting great information from your guides and higher self already, but then your ego, which has managed all of this input for you in the past, gets in the middle and you begin to doubt and second guess. In fact, your ego may have been instrumental in influencing your buying and reading this book that led you to this point. Your ego wants you to be happy. Your ego wants you to get what you have determined is important, that is, information, knowledge, understanding, and more. Your ego collects its information from your lower self and the world around you. Imagine for a moment that your ego is a really good administrative assistant or admin. Your admin does a wonderful job of making appointments, purchasing, organizing, setting up your business meetings, and managing your day. Your ego is like that. Next, imagine the reaction you would get if you told your admin you were going to handle all the appointments, purchasing, business meetings, and organizing and didn't need her anymore. The admin might ask, "Is there a problem with my performance? I have done a great job for you so far. Are you trying to eliminate me?" If, however, you told your admin you would start taking out the trash, she would reply, "Great, take the one under my desk first, since it gets filled the fastest." If you tell her you will start washing the windows, she will tell you that the ones in the reception need it the most and to do those first. Why? She does not want those jobs anyway. Your ego will not resist your higher self communication by selecting things that don't matter to you or your ego. This is an easy way to learn the language of the higher self. If you are a control freak and need to decide everything, then you will have to pay extra attention to this. For example, some people know exactly what they want to wear, exactly what they are going to eat, and manage even the most mundane details of their life with great precision. If this is you, decide now what you are willing to negotiate. Find out what you are willing to ask your higher self and then use that short list every day. Higher self. Is it in my highest and best good to take this route to work? Avoid using should I and always use the formal. Higher self, is it in my highest and best good to use the Stairmaster now? Higher self, is it in my highest and best good to prepare green beans? Higher self, is it in my highest and best good to make spinach for dinner? Then sit back and watch the magic. Maybe you prefer to use the treadmill in the gym, but you get a yes when you ask about the Stairmaster. You get to the Stairmaster machine and watch someone else get on the treadmill. Your envy turns into appreciation when you see that the treadmill is not working. It was the same machine you would have used. Little by little, the seeds of faith and knowing get planted. Within the practice period you've established, you will have enough synchronicity to know with great certainty the very real and tangible benefit of your higher self communication. At some point, your ego is looking at all of these wonderful synchronicities and starts to see that you will get everything, happiness, knowledge, understanding, and so on if you ask your higher self to decide. Full integration of the higher self. In reality, you are integrating the ego into your higher self so that your higher self is expressing God's will. It is a powerful place to be so fully connected to your higher self that you are always operating from your fifth dimensional self, or 5D. We will explain 5D in chapter 12 of this book. Ultimately, what you are doing is weaving the higher self and the ego together so that your ego wants what your higher self offers you because the benefit is clear. Your practice period gives your ego the proof. I am not one of the teachers who believe the ego must be subdued. Instead, I believe the ego can be integrated into the higher self and vice versa, creating one will, God's will. Later, after your practice period is complete and your higher self connection is crystal clear, it is okay to not know what your higher self tells you. I am laughing as I write this because when you test this out a few months from now, you will realize that once your higher self tells you any answer, you will regret not following it. You will probably choose not to follow your higher self only once. I only did this once and will write about what happened later in the book. I was sorry too. Furthermore, in all cases that I know of, the higher self connection will always insist and persist if it is critical, so no worries there. Remember, if you do not think you can go either way regarding something your higher self tells you to do, then do not ask. This is a perfect indication that you have an attachment to the outcome and that it is not a good higher self question for you during your practice time. Belief. Asking why serves the ego. Belief involves understanding, which still relies on the ego. Beingness relies on knowingness. Trust will follow after you have blindly followed your higher self signals for 6 weeks. Your practice will develop confidence, and that will lead to trust. It is about knowing that your higher self makes it possible for you to be in the moment. In the case of higher self questions, you choose to rely on the feedback you receive. This means you do not worry about whether you get immediate feedback about the choice and whether it was the perfect one or not. You will wait for some lovely synchronicity to give you feedback that shows the accuracy of your communication. For example, when you call a friend for lunch and he agrees to meet, you might ask where he wants to go. He does not care and offers you pick. I chose last time. So you ask your higher self, which is in my highest and best good. Chinese, pizza. You ask your higher self for each one, yes or no. Both answers should validate each other. Your higher self picks pizza, and while you are there, you run into someone you had been trying to connect with for months. Here, the universe is giving you the synchronicity and reinforcement that lets you know you are getting good information from your higher self. Remember, you must agree to follow whatever your higher self gives you during your practice period. If during your practice period you ask your higher self a question and then you decide not to follow it, you will sabotage your language skills. Forget keeping score. One man I worked with told me he was still having trouble with the higher self answers. I asked what kind of questions he was asking, and he said that he would ask his higher self if the traffic light in front of him would turn green before he got to it. I remember laughing and saying, "You still care about the answer?" And he replied, "No, I really do not care if the light is red or green." And I replied, "Yes, we are looking for immediate feedback that proves that you are right." He said, "No, I really do not care whether I get home 5 minutes later." As an engineer, he felt it was his responsibility to track his higher self's accuracy. What he is doing is keeping score. He thinks it is necessary in order to make sure the higher self is responding. He is an engineer and of course believes that he has to collect this data. While it is true you are to collect data, you must not seek immediate feedback. Instead, wait for synchronicity to provide the data to prove your higher self connection. If you practice basketball, you might stand in front of the basketball hoop, aiming and shooting dozens of times. At each opportunity, you would adjust your aim based upon the feedback of where the ball goes. If you look for this kind of immediate feedback with your higher self practice, you are likely to dismiss the correct answers as lucky guesses and the wrong ones with "see, it doesn't work." If you keep looking for feedback to get the evidence that your higher self was right, you have not totally detached from the practice questions. The purpose of this exercise is to learn to allow your higher self to communicate so that your ego will observe and conclude that this is a good thing. Ultimately, your goal is to incorporate your ego with your higher self so perfectly that the two become integrated into one will, God's will. Asking unimportant questions means you are not tracking the results. It is the very not tracking that produces the not caring attitude so very necessary to your success. As you let go of the need to evaluate or be right, your higher self will be able to give you enough evidence via the 50 or more daily questions that the results will be irrefutable. Instead of scorekeeping, let the synchronicities produce the score. Remember, it's important to choose questions for which you have no attachment to the outcome. Any sort of predictive question meant that the engineer would know instantly if his higher self was right or wrong. When he was right, he would compare it to all the wrong answers and conclude this whole higher self thing wasn't working. Again, scorekeeping isn't allowed during your practice period. Instead, let the synchronicities produce the score. I ask my higher self a question, but I never get an answer. If you do not get an answer to the question, "Is this my higher self telling me something?" consider the possibility that your higher self did not advise you like you think it did. Perhaps it is other forces within you. Be specific and confirm that it was your higher self giving you the answer. As a parent, have you ever heard a child answer to, "Who ate the last cookie in the cookie jar?" Of course not. No one will answer that question. The point is, if there is an entity in you urging you to take some action, or your lower self is wishing for some preferred outcome, you may think it is your higher self when it is not. When you ask the question, "Is this my higher self telling me to fill in the blank?" and you do not get your well-practiced yes signal, that is the answer. This lack of affirmative signal is proof that it is not your higher self leading you into this action. This is important to remember. The absence of a clear signal means it is not your higher self that is advising you in that moment. The only way to know for sure, especially when you are in a dilemma and really wondering, is to ask, is this my higher self telling me to do this? Only your higher self is permitted to answer. This is cosmic law. If you are having trouble with this, try rebalancing your energy by asking your higher self to show you your yes signal, your no signal, and your neutral signal. This will neutralize the field. Then ask the question again. Please be very careful. Your higher self will never tell you to do something that is dishonest or immoral. Your higher self will never justify any action that would hurt another. If you are suspicious of an answer from your higher self, ask again. When in doubt, do without. How do you achieve proficiency? Promise yourself that you will keep this commitment to ask your higher self as many mundane, ordinary, unimportant, or insignificant questions you can think of each day during your 6-week trial. I suggest you ask practice questions 50 times or more each day. Your higher self will not mind. It is an investment in your future. What kinds of questions are considered mundane? Anything to which you do not have an attachment. What kinds of questions will you ask? Is it in my highest and best good to wear the red shirt or the blue one, follow this route or that one to work, skip dinner, call someone now, go to the gym today now, take a break now or later, prepare carrots or cucumbers for dinner? If your dinner guests love carrots, you may already have decided on cooking carrots to please your guest. Just cook the carrots and do not ask during your 6-week trial. On the other hand, if you don't have a plan for dinner guests and you ask this question and the response is to cook carrots, then do it. Then when the doorbell rings and the surprise visitor who ends up staying for dinner happens to love carrots, you can thank your higher self for knowing this before you started cooking. No exceptions. During this practice period, please refrain from asking your higher self questions that are exceptionally important. This is to make sure you are not jeopardizing your practice period with issues to which you are attached. If you need to make an important decision that is time sensitive and you need to use your higher self, please do, but this should be a rare exception. Kindly postpone every significant question you possibly can until your practice period has been completed. Learning the language of non-judgment. How do you learn this language? Ask your higher self to work with you in achieving this awareness. Although it is not natural by normal standards of mass consciousness, you can acquire it with practice. Approach it like any change of habits. Perhaps when you were younger, you used slang words, and now you don't because they do not give you the results you now want. It is a bit like that. If you have been in a class with me, you know we practice reframing judgmental statements. For example, if you ask your daughter to stop being mean to your house guests, you are actually locking her into that behavior by asking her not to do that. Instead, you might ask her to be kind to everyone who visits because that is how we do things in our house. Notice that this statement does not state your daughter's behavior is good or bad, yet clearly conveys a different behavior is required. Neutral response. In the beginning of this higher self connection, I ask you to also ask your higher self for a signal for neutral. What does neutral mean? How can you use neutral? One of the easiest ways to reframe your judgmental statements is to begin to recognize polarity words that everyone uses and decide to stop using them in this way. It is easy to see polarity in the 5 reasons for neutral. 5 reasons for neutral. When your higher self gives you the neutral response to a yes or no question, you can use it to get more information. Neutral can mean one of 5 possibilities. There is no difference. Either answer will produce the same results. For example, you are at a fork in the road and your higher self can see that the fork merges before your destination. Therefore, there truly is no difference. 2. Ambiguous question. Perhaps you have asked something like, will I marry Henry in September? What if you will get married to Henry but not in September? Or which September do you have in mind? 3. It does not serve you to know. Sometimes you and your higher self know that you will act inappropriately if you know the answer. For example, if you ask if you will make your ascension in this lifetime, perhaps you will become overconfident and miss opportunities. This is called divine timing. 4. It does not serve you to know now. This is also about divine timing and is similar to number 3 above. Sometimes it just does not need to be known now. For example, when you ask, will I pass the test tomorrow? And you might use that information to go out and party instead of studying. Your higher self will give you the neutral response. Perhaps after you have studied and are ready for bed, the answer when the question is asked again will be yes. It is not in your stewardship, is number 5. This means you do not have the right to know this information. You do not have the password. If you ask, is my neighbor pregnant? And get neutral, it is really not your affair. The polarity-based 3D, we would say, it is none of your business. There's a very strong charge on this statement, and it should help you begin to see the difference between polarity-based thinking and word choices versus unity thinking and non-polarity word choices. Knowing the 5 reasons for neutral will accelerate your understanding of the neutral response and your ability to discern your higher self information. What is next after a neutral response? You can follow your neutral higher self response with a second question. Is it useful to pursue this further? If the answer is yes, you can begin to see one of 2 possibilities. Either there is no difference, or your question is ambiguous and needs clarity. You may now proceed to know more. If your answer to the question is it useful to pursue this is no, then you should drop the whole line of questioning. It is very important to understand that your higher self is not giving permission. When you ask your higher self a question, you are developing a relationship with the version of you that is fully connected to God. That is akin to asking about what will put you in alignment with who you are at your highest level of evolution. Your higher self knows this and will always answer with this in mind. Your higher self never corrects you or tells you that you are wrong. Being wrong is completely impossible in the 5th dimension. In 5th dimension, the only choice is a God-centered choice, and the not God choice does not exist. So in 5D, your response to any situation is always a good one. As you become more and more your 5th dimensional self, this type of polarity thinking does not occur to you. You have full awareness of your God connection, which makes choices that align with that God connection. Open-ended questions are for after your practice period. Open-ended questions are questions that could have any answer. Typically, they are the opposite of yes or no questions. You can ask your higher self any open-ended question. Who did that? When will my son understand? Why is such and such happening? One time I asked my higher self why my van was making a certain noise and surprised even myself with the precise answer that I had no reason to know or understand. Developing mastery with certain kinds of questions. I discourage you from asking your higher self questions so you can make a decision about something. This is because you are using your mind to draw information from your higher self, whereas your higher self might actually have information that you failed to ask to reach a different conclusion. It is the last question you ask. It is more appropriate to ask your higher self what you should do in a situation. For example, instead of asking your higher self if someone you do not care to see is going to be at a party so you can decide whether or not to attend, you can ask if it is in your highest and best good to be at that party. It is never advisable to ask your higher self about a situation and then make a decision. The action is ego-driven. At a certain level, your higher self will start giving you unsolicited information. This is the ultimate. If you develop a rapport with an expert who lives near you, at some point in the friendship, That person will offer information you have not requested. Why? Because the friendship and connection imply your interest in his advice. Actively soliciting your higher self many times during your practice period will open the gate and keep it wide open for information to flow freely in both directions. The logical reason for following your higher self. I always followed my higher self, knowing it is worthwhile. However, I desired to provide proof for those who were new to this arena. Knowing versus trusting the higher self could make a huge difference in deciding to always follow your higher self. For months I meditated on this question. I was obsessed with finding a logical reason to follow higher self unwaveringly. I understood this question would be useful to type A personalities. I knew many individuals would benefit from a logical reason for always following your higher self. One morning, the answer arrived as I was coming out of the dream time. I was seeing a local weather report as it interrupted a movie on TV. Why do we listen to this interruption? Logic tells us that when a weather report interrupts local programming, there is an impending change in the weather. It tells us the situation that appears normal is about to change drastically. It is a warning to take action now. If hail is suddenly expected, you may want to put your car in the garage. Once your higher self communication is strong and flowing easily in both directions, the logical reason to always follow your higher self is that your higher self will communicate with you in advance of when you need to know or do something. Having this advanced notice system that is always turned on and communicating with you allows you to quell the voice of logic that may be telling you something different. This is because your higher self is providing you with an interruption of local normal, with an update to inform you that things are not normal as they appear. Once you commit to always follow your higher self, it will be second nature for you to follow through. Learning the difference between third dimension and fifth dimension. Certain kinds of open-ended questions elicit more information than others. Open-ended questions may still hold expectations that would translate to their being third-dimensional questions. These questions ultimately are still polarity-based. Why? This is because they are based on limited thinking instead of possibility thinking. They are looking for an answer so you can take an action or understand something. Third-dimensional thinking seeks understanding so that the ego can act. Fifth-dimensional is not thinking, it is knowing. Where did my stuff go? Is looking for a place to go to retrieve it. When will my husband understand me? Asks how long I have to wait. Who is responsible helps me know who to blame, and why did that happen helps me to understand or change the situation so it will not happen again. In all cases, these questions use the higher self in a limited way because we then take an ego-based action after we get the polarity-based information. Missing objects. Save yourself hundreds of hours of effort by understanding this simple principle. Over the years, I asked more and more questions of my higher self. I paid close attention to things that happened that defied the rules we believe are supposed to govern our everyday activities. I began to notice that objects would disappear. Occasionally, they would reappear. In my frustration, I would complain, "Where did my stuff go?" The answer was always the same: it is in the higher dimension. This happened frequently enough to make me begin teaching participants in my workshops how to handle this if it was happening to them. They all reported it was, so I taught them what I had learned. I discovered I could ask for my object to return from the higher dimension. I would state, if my object is in the fourth dimension, I would like it back. Thank you very much. You can too. Your belongings didn't move to another location. They were there all the time, yet you couldn't see them in your third dimensional state. One day in the Asheville, North Carolina, I had a class where a builder who owned his own contracting business complained that his wife had lost her cell phone. He said she'd lost it 4 months prior and was sure she'd lost it in his truck. They took everything out, seats, carpet, and tools looking for that missing phone. In the end, he gave her his cell phone and purchased a new one. He asked, "What do you say to get something to come back?" I gave him the exact words. If my wife's cell phone is in a higher dimension, I would like it back now, thank you. He repeated this after me and added with emphasis, I'm driving to take us to lunch today. At the lunch break, he opened the driver's side door of the cab. I opened the passenger side just as quickly. We both wanted to see what would happen. He reached in under the seat and pulled out his wife's missing cell phone. He looked at me as he said, if this hadn't happened to me personally, I would not have believed you. Start asking your higher self how much you are loved. This is so powerful and so significant that I recommend you ask this of your higher self every single day. Higher self, show me how much I am loved. It is especially important when you are working at the pioneering level, clearing out painful emotional issues, no matter what the subject or venue. I put these heart instructions on my MerKaBa 2 CD. This, along with the Hathor toning, gives you a leg up on doing the meditation by yourself. Add this to your daily practice and watch your heart heal in ways you did not even know were needed. This request is to help you grow your self-love and develop trust with your higher self. It is not typically answered with words that invite you to take action. Thus, it is not breaking the 45-day rule. In my advanced workshops, we have had many examples of what happens to individuals when they ask this question, and I would like to share a few. A doctor who asked her higher self to tell how much she was loved saw a beautiful pink rose and several roses and hundreds of roses, and the colors kept increasing, finally representing the entire spectrum of the rainbow. In the spaces between roses, the light began to glow, gradually getting brighter and brighter. The whole thing gave her a feeling of soft, nurturing support. Peter, an engineer, wrote to me saying, I think I have my higher self answers for yes, no, and maybe. But I do not know what good it does me since the responses are unpredictable and unreliable. At least with the testing I am doing, that is why I have not done more along these lines. Unpredictability and unreliability force me to put it on a shelf of troubleshoot sometime when life allows. The testing I am doing is picking questions that are not consequential and to which I do not know the answer, but I can verify. The only type I can think of now are of a predictive nature. For example, will that streetlight be green when I arrive? Or will I have a message on my phone when I get back to it? The problem with other types of questions, such as, should I have chocolate or vanilla, is verification. For example, how would anyone check if one is the right answer? Do you have suggestions on the testing and development of a higher self dialogue such as we discussed? My answer signals were ideas that came to me during some afternoon pondering rather than in the moment of a meditation. Of course, I checked out the answers in meditation and they seemed to be confirmed, but I always have so much uncertainty about these kinds of things. That is why my attitude about such spiritual matters has developed to where I say, let it make itself known unmistakably. If it takes a burning bush, then that is the way it is. I make no apologies or excuses for that. I have made approaches the best way that I know. Then, with a definite, obvious answer, I do not always have to drift with all this constant uncertainty. I am sorry about the tone of this note, and if I missed some advice you may have given me. If you have any suggestions, I'd be grateful to hear them. Please note that his answer signals were ideas that came to him after the afternoon of pondering and not during his meditation. It can often happen that way when you are trying too hard, when you are determined to make your higher self connection clear. The answers will find their way into your awareness, but not necessarily during the actual meditation. The same person goes on to say that he checked out the answers in meditation and they seemed to be confirmed. The important thing is to not try to make these concepts work. Be gentle with yourself and find your way. My answer: your questions are insightful. Your experience of yes and no signals are also clear. It is always perfectly okay to assign values for the yes and no as signals. The higher self will work with whatever you wish as long as you are consistent. Your intent to get communication from the higher self must be built on your intention to practice without polarity judgment or keeping a score. If you ask only questions that are verifiable, you are still attached to the outcome and ultimately not trusting. What is happening is the ego is still attached to the how things work out instead of unquestioningly accepting the incoming information. By forcing yourself to ask only questions you can verify later, you still have judgment and attachment and are seriously limiting your practice. Some information will be verifiable, like what restaurant do we go to tonight? Well, in the restaurant you discover they have your favorite food that you did not know was on the menu. Other kinds of verification will pleasantly surprise you after the fact. Some will not show up at all. They will just be practice and blind faith, not caring, just practicing. If you ask what shirt to wear and you really do not care, but you could have worn a favorite white shirt that might have gotten ketchup all over it that day, you may see in hindsight the merit of asking your higher self, and you saved your favorite white shirt by asking your higher self. Your higher self is fifth dimensional, where there is no polarity. Your higher self is non-judgmental. Therefore, when you judge the answers, you are placing a third dimensional interpretation on your higher self by placing limitation on information that is coming from your higher self. Stop seeing it through the lens of judgment or the lens of the ego, and instead allow your experiences to teach you or show you during your practice period all the way through to non-judgment. You must begin to ask questions that are truly non-judgmental. You do not care if you can verify it at the ego level or any other level. Their verification will percolate up from within the environment, from sources inside and outside you. I call them synchronicities. Just as the marksman continues to increase the range of difficulty, you can now increase the level of difficulty in your non-attached questions to include non-attachment as to how they are verified. Notice that when he was trying to get higher self signals, it did not work for him, yet later when he was not working on it so intensely, they came. His clear intent allowed that to occur. If you are like this engineer Peter and have a very logical way of thinking and adapting to change, you will need to allow yourself this space and let go of data collection first. This means you must allow your higher self to communicate with you without your usual record keeping. You must lighten up your scientific thinking into a more playful approach. This is one of the reasons the Kahuna tradition says you must be like a child. It will give you the breathing room necessary for your higher self to shine. As your practice develops, you will notice the value of the higher self connection. Challenge your desire to evaluate this before your 45 days of practice and let the evidence weigh in at the end of the experiment. This specific practice, as detailed here, will enable you to achieve 100% accuracy with your higher self. I'm laughing because I have a friend who is named Peter, who's so logical too. He's like annoyingly pragmatic and pessimistic and non-believing. Anyway, another side story as the reader, not reading from the book, is I remember one time I had this beautiful vision when I was with a baby and I was receiving so much love and seeing, different guides and people and spirits, and it was so profound. But later on in the day I was questioning. I was like, did I make that up? Was that real? I was laying in my yard outside my house and I was just looking up at the sky and I was so determined. I was like demanding for a sign so strongly. I was like, if that was real, like I need the clearest sign in the whole world, like impossible to miss, like the most obvious sign you could possibly do right now. And a bee stung me in that moment as I asked that question, as I was finishing asking that question, in my left arm, like literally stung me immediately. It was the clearest sign ever, one of the clearest signs I've ever gotten in my life. So that's so true. I love asking for super clear signs like that. Okay, back to the reading. Advanced questions after your practice period is complete. These questions are for after 45 days from your start date. What if I ask my higher self about something and then decide I don't want to do it? Your higher self will not correct you or save you from your mistakes. Your higher self does not sit in judgment of your activities or decide you were wrong or bad because you asked a higher self question and then did not respond. Do you remember the story about Ginny, the woman with a black belt in martial arts who decided not to take the first exit? As she discovered, if you do not follow your higher self, you will regret it. One time I did not follow my higher self and regretted it later. While teaching in New York, I proposed getting together with some dear friends who lived there. The only night I had available, they had already made plans to see a movie. I checked in to see if I was supposed to see the movie. Nope, I really wanted to see my friends, so against the answer my higher self had given me, I went to the movie anyway, just so I could be with my friends. The movie was so bad, I wanted to walk out. Oh my god, I've done that before. I've walked out of a movie before. They thought the same thing. None of us wanted to be there, but all of us suffered through that awful movie out of concern for hurting the others' feelings. What a waste. Now I know better. I can promise you that if you ask your higher self, you will get the best answer that will please every aspect of you, even the ones you don't usually consider. Your ego might not think so in the moment, but hindsight is a great teacher. Your higher self has all your priorities and aspects in full view and is giving you an informed answer. The answer is the exact answer you would give yourself if you knew everything, and your higher self does. Become the humble servant. Become the fool to spirit. Give yourself permission to hear what is going on. Once you've learned to step out of judgment, you will be open to the messages of the universe all the time. The daily practice of the MerKaBa will clear your judgments, wounds, and fears. Get in the habit of asking in this non-judgmental way, what is going on? You will be amazed at the answers that will start coming. The universe rearranges itself to accommodate your picture of reality. What fascinates you? This is what the universe works on. The goal then becomes being a master of divine expression. It means no limitation. You are not locked into physical reality. We are becoming light from within. We are no longer looking to an outside authority. Remember, what do you do when something happens that defies explanation? Ask your higher self, what is going on? After your practice period, you may start asking this and other open-ended questions. Steps for initiating and keeping your higher self connection. Step 1. Establish clear communication. Do it this way. Invite your higher self. While in meditation at breath 14, say, Higher self, I am choosing to be in my heart. Please join me in my heart. I am making a commitment to be in my heart, and I am asking that you assist me with my communication with you. Please clarify or give me a signal for yes. Wait for the response. Please give me a signal for no. Wait for the response. Please give me a signal for neutral. Wait for the response. Step 2. Continue the practice for a minimum of 6 weeks. Do it this way. 3 agreements with your higher self for your practice period. Do your practice period for a minimum of 45 days. 1. Ask questions. Ask only yes or no questions, no open-ended questions. Ask unimportant, insignificant questions throughout the day as often as 30 to 50 times. Do not ask predictive questions that invite your ego to track your progress. If you are tracking your progress, you still care about the outcome. Also, do not ask important questions. If you absolutely cannot defer any asking a specific question until after your practice period, then make a rare exception. 2. Take action. Always follow through on your answer from your higher self, no exceptions. 3. Avoid other divination tools. Do not use any form of divination during your practice period, such as kinesiology, muscle testing, finger testing, cards, or pendulums. You are only asking for your higher self during this practice period. Your job during the practice period is to keep your ego out of the action and use passive positive feedback to reinforce your signals. Step 3. Make a commitment to your practice period. When you are ready to commit to your higher self during your next MerKaBa meditation, you will tell your higher self you are making a commitment to work with your higher self, and you are asking your higher self to work with you in return. You name the length of time and the date, such as June 1st. Your practice period will end. You thank your higher self for working with you. Step 4. Feel higher self love for you. At each subsequent meditation during the pause between breaths 14 and 15, Ask your higher self to show you how much you are loved.